We're going to begin chapter 2 of Washed Up. And before we do that, I'd like to review a little bit. So we have 3 different families, and they've all been dropped off in different locations. So let's talk about the locations that they've been dropped off in. The Lius are a family of 4. There's Mr. Liu, Mrs. Liu, Shen, and Mei. And they have been dropped off on the mountain that is also a volcano. Volcano, if I could spell volcano right. So when we left them yesterday, they were on the volcano. Then we have the Walpoles, and we have Mr. Walpole, Mrs. Walpole, and Oliver. The Walpoles have been dropped off on the beach, and they are now in the rainforest, which is right next to the beach. But if you remember, Oliver said it was much hotter in the rainforest because even though there wasn't as much light coming in, and that's because the rainforest holds humidity. It doesn't have a lot of place to go. Humidity is like kind of how wet the air is. And then we have the Garcias were dropped off in the mangrove forest, or mangrove swamp. And mangroves are a type of tree, and their roots are very big, and they are usually covered by water unless the tide is low. And we have Mr. Garcia and his daughter, Gabriella. So, with that being said, I'd like you to listen for the word predicted and teeming. Teeming is probably a new word for you, but I think you'll get it just fine. So, predicted and teeming. And I'm going to read 5 pages again, so the beginning of chapter 2, and then we will carry on from there. Okay, so we have chapter 2. Oh, look at Mrs. Walpole. Oh boy. As I predicted, in so little time, so much has changed. Perhaps Berry Blue was referring to her hairdo, woven with leaves to make her look like a forest nymph. Now the Walpoles were on the TV screen, and they didn't cut as pretty a picture. Mrs. Walpole had just emitted a blood-curdling cry that shook the forest to its roots after a spider had used her hand as a landing pad. "We need a fire to keep the creepy crawlies away," said Mr. Walpole frantically. Oliver inhaled deeply. "Dad, the matches are all wet." "Oh, great. Let's play the blame game," said Harvey Walpole. "Your mother was half drowning in the waves, and you wanted me to think about the matches?" The water they'd waded through to come ashore had only been knee-deep, but Oliver bit his lips. This was probably not the best time to make a point. "It's too sticky for a fire anyway," said Mrs. Walpole, lifting one perfectly arched eyebrow, and it makes my hair frizz." Oliver said nothing. He was looking at the jungle canopy towering above them like a 30-story building. Up. It seemed the only way to escape a forest floor teeming with bugs was to go up, but the thought of it made him a little light-headed. He stared at the buttress roots propping up the tallest trees and masses of vines and creepers that looked like spaghetti. The thought of food made Oliver's stomach rumble. The creepers weren't for eating, but they were as thick as a man's arm, twisting and twining up to the sun. Maybe they had other uses. "Let's make a camp," he shouted. "We can cut these creepers and build somewhere to sleep." "I'll handle that," said Mr. Walpole gallantly, and Oliver heaved an inward sigh of relief. The family spat had been postponed, at least for now. Uh-oh. Oh no. Oh, internet. Let me me see if I can get back there pretty quick. Nice. There we go. And we're reading to page 23, so both of these. So that was all about the Walpoles, nothing about the Lewes so far, and then we have the Garcias here. Mr. Garcia was also looking up, which explained why his foot got caught in a mess of tangled roots. His ankle throbbing painfully, but his heart jumped. Water, food, fuel, and shelter. That was it. Coconut palms, said Gabriella, feeling thankful for these drift seeds that had traveled across oceans and on currents to take root on this remote island. She shot her father a worried look as he exasperated his foot, wincing. Are you okay, Papa? He nodded, although a red-hot flash of pain surged through his leg as they trudged forward, the mud clenching around their feet. The tide was coming in faster than they'd expected, submerging their swampy jetty and threatening to overcome them. Sprained ankle or not, they would have to keep moving, even if every moment was excruciatingly slow. They clambered to dry land as the tide rose higher. We'll slash palm leaves together for our shelter here, said Gabriella, recalling all the survival adventures she'd watched on TV and read about in books. They made it look so easy. Save some palm fronds for the ground to insulate us, she said, and saw the agreement on her father's face. Then he looked away. Gabriella's father had never stepped out of the little town where he was born, and now they were in a mangrove swamp. There would be rising tides and hungry crocodiles, as well as leeches and snakes that she hoped the palm fronds would protect them from. Gabriella was glad she didn't have to spell it out for him. And that's page 23. So let's look at our vocabulary. So today we looked at the Walpoles and the Garcias. So we did not have the Lewes today. So the first word that we had was was predicted, and that was on page 18. So let me go back to page 18. Predicted is, right there at the very beginning. As I predicted, in so little time, so much has changed. So what does the word predicted mean here? It is kind of telling the future, right? Telling the future. It's using what you know to tell the future, but when you predict something, you kind of, making a guess. Let me get rid of that. So let me add guess. We have forecast. That's kind of what a weatherman does. He or she forecasts the weather. They predict what the weather's going to be. A guess, which I already have. Calling it. I know I hear people say, called it, all the time when they get something right. Judging something. In order to predict, you kind of have to judge your surroundings. Or judge what the text is saying. And it's just also sometimes just thinking, using your thinking skills. Anticipate means to think about what's coming ahead. What's coming ahead. Move that up. And then I also have foresee. And I have see it coming. Put that down here. See it coming. All right. So think of some opposites or antonyms as I draw lines to connect these words to predict. And then antonyms might be things like surprised, knew or didn't know, unknown, leave it. Those will all work. I'm sure you guys will come up with better ones in the live version. in the live lesson. So I'll cover that in a red box since they are antonyms. And then this is something that you do, right? It's a thought that you do. So that even though it's just thought, it's still a verb. It's an action. We have verb. And then we have some variations of predict. We have the base word of, or predicted. We have predict. We have predicting. And we have predicts. Those are all variations of the word. And then I need to use it in a sentence, and I'm going to say, my mom predicted I'd get an A on my spelling test because I studied. That is mostly true. It's one thing we don't have with virtual learning is spelling tests. All right. The next word that we had is teaming, and that's on page 20. So let me go back to the story and flip to page 20. 1920, teaming. And this one, I believe, was at the top as well. There it is. It seemed the only way to escape a forest floor teeming with bugs was to go up. So Oliver is talking about how many bugs there are there. So teeming is just kind of a fancy word for a lot. And it's not just necessarily a lot, it's more than a lot. So like filling or full and packed. The forest floor was packed with bugs or overflowing, bursting at the seams, bursting with bugs. So many bugs were on the forest floor. Plentiful means that there were plenty of them, that the bugs were thick. There were so many of them, or numerous. And did I put many? I did put so many. So the teeming just means like overflowing, just like so much. Like most of you are probably gonna hope that your Halloween buckets are teeming with candy, right? That they're just so full of candy. What's that the right color I want? I need black, please, to connect to teeming. So think of a sentence. I'm sorry, think of some antonyms for the word teeming. Small number, minimal, not enough, few. There we go. Slight, low in numbers. Those are all work. Let me put a red box around those. Again, I'm sure the live version will be better. And then there is only one, I guess, no, there's more than one. So the base word is team, T-E-E-M. Now we also have T-E-A-M, and that's like a group of people that are working together like a basketball team. This is obviously different. It's spelled different, and it means something completely different. So be careful. We have teams, and we have teamed. I'm sure those are all of the variations. And then this type of word is describing. Let's go back to the story. It's describing the forest floor. The forest floor teeming with bugs. So it's describing it. A descriptive word is an adjective. And then we need to use this in a sentence. So I'm going to say just what I said before. Most kids are hoping their Halloween buckets are teeming with candy. All right. Very good. Very good. Very good. See if I can make it a little bit shorter. Perfect. All right. We have a couple more slides left, so let's check them out. Let's do some character analysis here. So we are talking about the Walpole family. They were our biggest focus today, the Walpoles and the Garcias. But let's just focus on the Walpoles right now. So the Walpoles are Mr. Walpole, Mrs. Walpole, and Oliver. And what I'd like to do is kind of go over what we know about these characters based on what we've read so far. So what I'm actually going to do is go back to the text and reread the part about the Walpoles, and I believe it's the 3 pages. So chapter 2 again. As I predicted, in so little time, so much has changed. Perhaps Berry Blue was referring to her hairdo, woven with leaves to make her look like a forest nymph. Now the Walpoles were on the TV screen, and they didn't cut as pretty as a picture. Mrs. Walpole had just emitted a blood-curdling cry that shook the forest to its roots after a spider had used her hand as a landing pad. So now we know that Mrs. Walpole is afraid of spiders. We need a fire to keep creepy crawlies away, said Mr. Walpole frantically. Oliver inhaled deeply. Dad, the matches are all wet. Oh, great. Let's play the blame game, said Harvey Walpole. Your mother was half drowning in the waves, and you wanted me to think about the matches? So now we're kind of getting that his dad is making some excuses, right? The water they'd waded through to come ashore had only been knee deep, but Oliver bit his lip. This was probably not the best time to make a point. It's too sticky for a fire anyway, said Mrs. Walpole, lifting one perfectly arched eyebrow, and it makes my hair frizzy. So we know that Mrs. Walpole is worried about her looks, even though she's on a survival show. Now, there's a word that we can use for that, and it's called vain, VAIN, and it just means like all worried about yourself, and you think yourself is the best. Most of the time, people who are vain are only they don't care about other people, and they only worry about how they look, what they do, them. So that is definitely describing Mrs. Walpole because she's so worried about her hair, even though she's on a survival show. Oliver said nothing. He was looking at the jungle canopy towering above them like a 30-story building. Up. It seemed the only way to escape a forest floor teeming with bugs was to go up. But the thought of it made him a little lightheaded. He stared at the buttress roots propping up the tallest trees and masses of vines and creepers that looked like spaghetti. So here we see that Oliver is trying to problem solve. He's being a problem solver, trying to figure out how he and his family are going to make it through the night. The thought of food made Oliver's stomach rumble. The creepers weren't for eating, but they were as thick as a man's arm, twisting and twining up to the sun. Maybe they had other uses. Let's make a camp, he shouted. We can cut these creepers and build somewhere to sleep. I'll handle that, said Mr. Walpole gallantly, and Oliver heaved an inward sigh of relief. The family spat had been postponed, at least for now. So now we have Mr. Walpole is offering to help make the camp. Oliver suggested building the camp, and Mr. Walpole is saying that he will do that. So let's go back to our thinking map here. And we have Mr. Walpole first. So the first thing was that Mr. Walpole likes, let me type. There we go. Likes to make excuses. He was making excuses for why the matches were wet. And that's kind of a problem because the family could have really used the matches had they been just a little bit more careful. But he does offer to help build camp. So that's a good thing. So at least he's willing to work with the rest of the family. But then we have Mrs. Walpole. And the first thing that we read about was how she is terrified of spiders. I did not spell spiders right. And she needed help, right? She needed help in shallow water, which if it was only knee deep, most of us can walk through water that's knee deep. She was not able to. She needed help walking through shallow water, and she's vain. She's only worried about herself, but it'll make my hair frizzy. Oh, please, lady, you're on a reality show, a survival show. I think the last thing you should be worrying about is your hair. And then we have Oliver. Oliver's kind of like the brains of the family, it seems like. He's kind of got his act together. He's not making excuses. He's not really afraid of much, but he notices the problems and tries to solve them. He also, one of the problems was the wet matches. And then he also suggests building a camp, which his father was all about. So these things help us understand the characters just a little bit more. So the whole point of a character development, or character descriptions, is to help the reader understand the characters and their actions. When we understand their actions, it helps us understand the story just a little bit better. All right, nice job. All right, let's carry on. And now I'd like to compare and contrast the Lou family with the Walpole family. Well, the Lou family has 4 family members, and they were dropped on a mountain, dropped off on a mountain, I should say, on a mountain. They are very interested in the parents, I should say, are very interested in the cameras, and the kids try to problem solve. All right, I'm gonna make that a little bit smaller so it sets in. Oh, you know what I'm noticing is that when we get over to the Walpole family, Oliver also tries to problem solve. So I'm gonna actually move kids over to the center here. The kids try to problem solve. And then they are all stuck on the same island, and their goal is survival. So I'm going to leave those in the center there. Now, the Walpole family has 3 family members. They were dropped off on the beach and wandered into the rainforest. And then the parents are used to luxury. So they're used to the fancy things. So if we were going to compare and contrast them, this was actually really good. We got 3 points for each section. They have a lot of similarities. They're all part of the same thing, but they are very different families. One family kind of seems to be what we would call rich and yuppie. They're only worried about the fancy things. But then the Lou family seems to be more interested in the fame that's going to surround them based on this activity that based on this survival show that they are on. All right, so one last thing that I wanted to look at, and if you were in the live lesson, you would have participated, but I went and I researched some survival shows that are on TV or have been on TV in the recent past. And the ones that I came up with were The Amazing Race, and I think that's a reality show about getting from one place to another. There's Project Runway, and that's a reality show about making the coolest outfits. Then there's Top Chef and the Great British Bake Off. And those are both cooking shows. The goal is to be the best cook. Then there's The Masked Singer and The Voice and American Idol. And those 3 are all reality shows about being the best singer. Then there's Survivor, which is kind of like Washed Up. They have to survive in different places. Then there's The Deadliest Catch, which is all about it's a fishing reality show. Then there's Shark Tank. Shark Tank is a reality show about ideas. So people have ideas and they bring them to those 6 people, and then those 6 people tell them if they're good ideas or not. And the goal is to have your idea become a real thing. There used to be this show called Fear Factor, and that was all about making people face their fears, which was kind of cool. And then one that I actually really liked was The Biggest Loser, and that was all about people who were overweight gaining their lives back by becoming healthier. And the person who lost the most weight, so they had the biggest loss, was the winner for that. And so I asked in the live lesson, what type of show you would have wanted to be on. So, a cooking show, a singing show, fear show, idea show, that kind of thing. So, if you missed that, shoot me an email and tell me which one you would have wanted to be on, or tell me in your assignment.